Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Well, it's that time of year. I'm facing another birthday. So I thought since I've been covering everybody's birthday, I'd take this opportunity to share some other little aspects of my life. So I hope you enjoy this segment. I had this sort of question comment from Oracle of Luna podcast. And so I thought I would respond to this. Hi, Judy. I'm curious if you've done a show segment about you and how you became your character, Mary Ellen, on the Waltons. I'd be interested in knowing how you were chosen for the part, how you prepared for the character, what you loved about being Mary Ellen as she evolves through the years, seasons. Maybe there's a segment on Mary Ellen and you, and I just haven't seen it. Many thanks for your channel. I still watch the Waltons occasionally since it's so upbeat, inspiring, and still relevant after all these years. So thank you very much. So in terms of casting, yes, I did talk about the casting for the homecoming, which is when all of us kids were originally cast. And then when it came time to do the series, we were all asked to continue on to the series. As far as the casting for the homecoming, I was brought in. It was my agent called and said I had an audition, and I was sent the scene. And the scene was in the barn when we are cracking walnuts for Mama's applesauce cake. And all of the children, including John Boy, are there in the barn. And I was lucky because that scene really featured Mary Ellen quite a lot. So I really had something to sink my teeth into. So in terms of preparing, because she was supposed to be 13 and a tomboy, I was 13 and a tomboy, so I had that going on in my favor. And I thought, oh, country, and kind of, and so I didn't have overalls or anything, and I don't think I necessarily understood that overalls were, a part of what would become iconic with my character early in the series, not so much in the homecoming. In that, I wore sort of a ill-fitting dress. But I went in cutoff shorts, kind of like what I wore in the Dust Bowl Cousins, those really short cutoffs. I don't know what I was thinking, but those were the shorts I had, and I put them on, and I think a t-shirt, and I was barefoot, which we also did a lot in the first seasons, and I get asked about. Yes, I did. I was barefoot a lot in real life, and my hair in pigtails. And I just related to the character because I was someone who could be combative with my siblings and had a lot of opinions. And fortunately, my parents were not so restrictive that we weren't allowed to voice our opinions. You might get told to, basically have better manners or things like that if I started spouting off too much. But I really related to this character. And the dialogue, it was so well written that to me, my preparation was just, what's her attitude here? And she's clearly on a rant. So that was pretty easy to deduce from that scene. So I went in the first time. They brought 6 or 7 of us into the room, one for each character. Somebody may have read the part of John Boy because I believe Richard Thomas was already cast. And so we all read together. And then I had a callback, so they brought me back in, same scene. And I was always told, I guess through acting teachers or my agent, that go back, wearing the same thing you wore before because they liked you, so they aren't asking for something different. So I went back in, same thing. And again, 6 or 7 of us in the room, and we read that scene again. And then there was a third time we were called in, and this time there were only 6 of us there. And they brought us into the room, and they basically said, you are the ones we would like to use for this show. Basically, we're hiring you. And I think maybe they just wanted to see us all together and make sure that that all kind of worked as a group. I don't remember if I had read with any of the cast in my prior auditions or not, because I didn't know them then, so I didn't have a reason to remember them. But it was very exciting to get cast. I loved many aspects of the character. I loved the rebellious nature. I loved all of the bickering and teasing, and particularly with John Boy, and my other siblings. We had a lot of fun with that. The eye rolls, which I don't remember if that was originally something in a script that said as she rolls her eyes, or whether it was just something I did as an instinctive reaction to something. But it became a bit of Mary Ellen's trademark. I think I have at times gone through and pulled together, had a small montage of times when Mary Ellen rolled her eyes about one thing or another. And I think it's something that I do in real life. So likely it came easily. And then I also loved that although she might pick on her siblings, she also would be the first one to defend them if someone else was picking on them. And the fact that she even got into a fight at school when she was defending Jim Bob, who was wearing a girl's blouse with a little ruffled collar, I love that. And that we all as siblings were like that the family always stood up for each other. And even though we might bicker at times, we closed ranks against anyone else coming in and being mean or picking on any of the family. As Mary Ellen evolved, I wanted her to be someone who was compassionate and caring. And so I really liked that she wanted to take care of others and that she chose that path to become a nurse, and she wanted to make a difference in the lives for herself, but also the lives of others and her family, so that she wanted to go and care for the people up in the mountains. I loved those storylines when I got to ride the horse up into the mountains and take care of those people, because it also gave me something to do. It gave me some featured storylines that weren't simply about being a wife or a mother, because, I did that when I first was married to Kurt and then when I first had John Curtis. So this added yet another dimension to the character, so I could be an example, particularly in that time period when it wasn't as common for women to have careers, that I was doing something that reflected so much of modern times when women can be wives and mothers and have careers. And yes, it's a balancing act. And yes, oftentimes you drop the ball somewhere. But, as women, we have a lot of capabilities and we do the best we can. And I think that Mary Ellen was a good example of that, and that she would figure out how to do these things and how to fight for what she wanted. And that even when she made mistakes, that she would learn from them and she would grow from that. So I really admired those aspects of the character. And when I spoke with Marion Hamner Hawks, who was basically the character that I was playing, that was the real life person, that she said that she had a lot of those same characteristics. So I'm sure that helped Earl in writing the character of Mary Ellen. And I think that Marion and I were probably shared a lot of similar characteristics. And so it was easy for me to relate to the character. And I think she also liked the portrayal and how her life was represented via Earl's writing and my performances. I did find that the character paralleled my own life in many ways along the run of the show, starting off, as I said, that I was a tomboy and that I could be a little combative. I that I was into sports and all that kind of stuff. So those were simple things for me to relate to. But that I also evolved and grew as a person. And I think I grew more sensitive to other people and not so self-centered myself, as we can be when we're young. It was all about me. And I grew to then have more compassion and outwardly, I've always wanted to help other people, whether it's sharing knowledge or advice or whatever, or being there for friends when someone needs me. I've tried to do that. So, trying to mature and be more responsible, both as a person and then through my character. I came across a fun piece of trivia. I have no idea if this is true or not, but It says, in 1976, some CBS executives proposed the idea of a time-jumping crossover episode with MASH. The storyline would have Mary Ellen, now serving as a doctor in the U.S. Army, temporarily assigned to the 407 7th. The creators and stars of both shows, bewildered at the proposal, thought it highly ill-advised, and the plan was abandoned. I was never asked about it, and I think it probably was ill-advised, but it sure would have been fun to do. And I wasn't asked. I was not told anything about it, if indeed it was even true. But likely there was something in there with CBS looking to do crossover type shows. But who knows? After the Waltons, maybe I could have, I was older at that point, they could have brought me in as a nurse or doctor serving in the Korean War. Who knows? Could have been fun. I would have loved to have done an episode of MASH. I love that show. I've also been asked about other work that I've done subsequent to the Waltons. And one of the things when I moved into writing and directing, it gave me a whole other perspective, which I really enjoyed, and that it didn't have to be all about the focus being on me. I learned a lot about leadership and what that means, and that it can take a lot of different forms. Sometimes it's about taking the advice of others and working in a collaborative way, but recognizing that lots of people can have good ideas, but ultimately there has to be a decision point. There has to be that you can't do things by committee. There has to be somebody whose final decision guides the path and has like a through vision. But I certainly enjoy hearing other people's suggestions, and I don't necessarily feel like mine is always the best or the only way, but sometimes recognizing that making a decision, even if it doesn't ultimately end up being the best one, is better than being wishy-washy and making no decision. And I think that is true in virtually all areas of life, that you kind of need to be somewhat decisive and not float along and wait for everybody else to tell you what your life is going to be. And certainly in those situations where people were looking to me to sort of guide the ship. But, also knowing that when you make mistakes or you're wrong, not to be afraid to say it. And any number of times when I've been doing things, I go, no, I was wrong. Let's change that. And I think people respect that because people can see when something's wrong. So it isn't as if you're fooling anybody by continuing to insist that it's right when you also recognize that it's not. I hope you've enjoyed this segment. If you did, please consider hitting like and subscribe. Every year when I have another birthday, I have mixed feelings because, those numbers they just don't equate to me. Turning 68, it's like, 70 is right around the corner. And do I feel 70? No, some days I wake up feeling stiff and going, oh yeah, I feel at least 70. And other times, it's so true what people say. You're as young or as old as you feel, and that it's just a number, and it's really all about quality of life. And as long as I continue to do things that I enjoy, and I can help enhance the lives of those around me and be happy and help others be happy, then, onward. So thanks for joining me for this segment, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching.